Coming up, more revelations in the Trojan Horse affair and a reaction to the latest report into Birmingham schools.
How to get the best out of children. The next in our series following a head teacher through her week.
And by George, it's the Prince's first birthday today, plus dozens of others. We share the fun at 6. More revelations in the Trojan Horse affair and reaction to the latest report. That's next.
The national and international news is here in 30 minutes on ITV, after the stories from your area.
This is ITV News Central. On our programme tonight, disturbing findings from the Trojan Horse inquiry. Now, teachers who allowed extremism in schools could face disciplinary action.
Those who really matter are the children and their parents and their communities. The risk is that what has happened has made those children potentially more vulnerable.
The Chinese touched down in the West Midlands for their first flying visit.
Why have you left all your crusts?
Because I got hairy chest.
Don't you want a hairy chest? Okay.
How our Midlands head teacher gets the very best from her pupils.
And we catch up with the babies who share Prince George's birthday.
Hello, good evening. The Education Secretary has announced that teachers who allowed extremism in some Birmingham schools could face disciplinary action. It follows the official publication today of a widely leaked government-ordered inquiry into the Trojan Horse allegations, which uncovered a culture of bullying and intimidation.
Describing the findings as disturbing, the new Education Chief, Nicky Morgan, said a new commissioner for schools in Birmingham is to be appointed. There will also be a top-level review of governance within Birmingham City Council.
In a moment, we'll hear the reaction from school staff and parents. But first, live to our political correspondent, Alison Mackenzie at Westminster. So, Alison, what now?
Well, the first thing is to digest the findings of this report, widely leaked as we know, but what does it say? It uncovers some very damaging allegations that were now proven to be true about some Birmingham schools, and very much now looking forward to the recommendations it makes. But what does it reveal? This report tonight from Lee Comley.
The death of Lee Rigby was some kind of staged event or hoax, according to some teachers at Parkview, while Golden Hillock pupils were shown images of jihad, including battlefields and rocket launchers, all findings that have emerged with the official publication of today's report. It says there was a campaign to introduce an aggressive Islamist agenda in some schools. Birmingham City Council knew about concerns, according to the report, but for fears of claims of racism, not enough was done.
It's quite clear that Birmingham City Council at least knew or suspected that these sorts of things were happening for some considerable period of time, but didn't do enough to stop it.
Whilst I can acknowledge that Birmingham City Council, I'm afraid, did know of certain things over a number of years and didn't act on them, equally that's true of the Department for Education. I think we're both culpable here and we need to accept that.
Watching the Education Secretary's speech in the House of Commons were members of the Head Teachers Union and a parent from one of the affected schools. One outcome from today is that the funding for Old Know Academy has now been terminated. But despite having a child there, one parent says this is positive.
I'm not feeling dread and fear, like what's going to happen next. It means that we can now get people in to manage and run the school the way that it should have been run.
The principal of the academy says she was pressured into making sweeping changes at the school and welcomes today's recommendations.
There's been some kind of a movement, with the cancellation of Christmas, like I've outlined the various activities that have been cancelled in Christmas, the way we're always celebrating Christmas, and for that just to be cancelled, for Birmingham City Mission just to be cancelled, for other activities to be cancelled, it's not good. It shouldn't just be the governing body making that decision.
Despite today's report, some parents of pupils at Old Know disagree with its findings.
When you have accusations like this thrown at them, you're giving them
that platform to go and research it. They had no idea what these words meant. They didn't know that this horrible world existed. But now they've been exposed to it. So who's actually exposing them to it? We're not exposing them to it. They've been stigmatised.
With the Education Secretary saying there was compelling evidence that hardline Muslims had tried to gain access to the governing bodies of a number of schools. The challenge going forward will be to make sure this can't happen in future and restore faith in parents that their school's focus is on the most important thing, the quality of their child's education. Lee Comley, ITV News.
What is clear there, that there's passion about this subject on both sides of the debate. The job today for the new Education Secretary was to cut through that and provide a framework for the future. Now we know that Sir Albert Bohr has already apologised for failings by the City Council to get a grip and to act on warning signs. What would be the result of Nicky Morgan? Well, firstly, she did explain the very nub of the report's findings.
There has been no evidence of direct radicalisation or violent extremism, but there is a clear account in the report of people in positions of influence in these schools with a restricted and narrow interpretation of their faith, who have not promoted fundamental British values and who have failed to challenge the extremist views of others.
Her own department, the new department she's taken over, has been criticised, but there was no apology today, despite the plea from Liam Byrne, one of all of the MPs in there from Birmingham watching the debate today. And he did say he welcomed the announcement of a new schools commissioner for the city.
The first task of that commissioner is to ensure that teachers and officials who shouldn't be in their jobs should either resign or be removed. But the bigger task is this, is to come together now with the City of Birmingham and with the parents and pupils of Parkview School to rebuild trust, to rebuild the pride of the pupils and to ensure that the reputation of this school is turned around, because its best years now lie ahead.
So that's Liam Byrne, not taking a party political stance today, but thinking very much of the schools in his constituency affected by that. And that was a similar view taken up by Shabana Mahmood, who is the Birmingham Ladywood MP. She too says now is a time to draw a line and look to the future.
We need a clear plan of action for what's left of July, all of August, to make sure that we've got some systematic ideas for how we move forward so that kids in Birmingham can go to school in September safe in the knowledge that all of these issues have been put to bed, they've been dealt with, and they can get on with focusing on their education.
And so, yes, looking ahead to the future, it is very much a plan where all the different parties will get together. And of course, some of the governors have already resigned from Parkview Academy, we know. There is much more to come on this and much more we'll be reporting.
Alison, I think you may well have answered this, but is it fair to say that the Trojan Horse affair is now nearing its end?
Well, the Education Secretary did mention that there will be a possibility of any disciplinary action. It's not just a whitewash and forgotten about. There are many big questions to answer, so there is more to come out about the actual governance in the schools concerned. But Birmingham City Council is saying they want to get a grip, look to the future and make sure that the children at the heart of this have their education protected.
Alison Mackenzie, thank you very much.
Other news, the West Midlands is fast becoming the first port of call for Chinese investors, following several high-profile takeovers, including MG Rover and the London Taxi Company.
Revenue from tourism is growing too, and today the push to get more Chinese visitors here continued as the first direct flight from China to a British airport outside of London touched down in Birmingham. It was the first of 3 trial return flights from Beijing, as Callum Watkinson reports.
After a 10-hour journey non-stop from Beijing, a water cannon salute welcomed flight CZ3001 to Birmingham Airport. They can't have planned the rainbow, but Britain's tourism bosses do believe more Chinese visitors equals more pots of gold. Waiting in the terminal, Chinese lions and a lineup of dignitaries. It's the first time a direct flight from China has touched down anywhere outside our capital city.
So a little bit of history for Birmingham Airport. These 248 tourists are the first Chinese nationals to fly direct from their country and land anywhere other than London.
Revenue from Chinese tourism grows by a fifth every year, and in 2012 it brought £62 million into the West Midlands economy. China's growing middle classes have money in their pockets and a fondness for foreign travel, and our tourist boards have their sights set on young professionals like Zhao Tianling.
For me, it's no big difference, London and Birmingham. But the first difference is, there's a very warm welcome here in the airport. I don't think everyone can encounter this kind of happiness, it's action. So it's really, we are very lucky, I would say.
That warm welcome is not just traditional Brummie hospitality, but actual government policy. The Great China Welcome campaign was launched when David Cameron was in China at the end of last year. Its stated aim is to make Britain the most welcoming place in Europe for Chinese visitors. The boss at Birmingham says his airport proved this morning it has a part to play in those efforts.
Those passengers got off the aeroplane and were through in about 20 minutes. They'd still be circling around London at the moment before they could land at Heathrow. So they're on their way, the buses are now leaving behind me, and the tourists have all been very happy.
The weekly service to Beijing and back is only a trial. It will run until August the 5th. But Birmingham recently extended its runway to accommodate long-haul flights, signalling that it's serious about becoming an alternative gateway for international travel. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
Well, meanwhile, 150 new jobs are being created at a manufacturing firm in Coventry a year after it was taken over by a Chinese company. Covpress in Canley, which makes body panels for firms like Jaguar Land Rover, will brief 500 workers about big growth plans for the next 2 years.
Well, the time is coming up to 12 minutes past 6. You're watching ITV News Central, still to come on the programme. How a year flutters by. Butterflies for all the babies who share a royal birthday.